rather than writing letters simply, which is very important to folks and giving people support, we're also doing actions to break down the bars in general so that nobody ever needs to be in a situation like that again. And that's the idea of prison abolition. I work with Critical Resistance. It's a national organization. And the basis of the organization is prison abolition. We don't believe that we should have another prison cell, another jail cell. And all of our efforts are to destroy prisons and the prison industrial complex. I mean, there was a time in society when we didn't have penitentiaries. So the modern penitentiary is a modern capitalist response to our need for public safety. And the modern penitentiary is a response for us to feel safe. So if at the end of the day, this thing is locking up our friends, and the structures and its tentacles are actually making us feel unsafe, we need to respond decisively to destroy the whole thing, from top to bottom. What that means, it means a lot of things. From our perspective, it means coming up with ways that in the very beginning, in the point of arrest, we challenge the state at the point of arrest all the way up to the point of incarceration. So at the point where somebody feels a harm, right, what makes them dial 911, right? It's that response of needing to feel safe, needing to have somebody neutralize the situation and come in and protect them, right? However, when you call 911, what happens? The police come, right? As soon as they intervene, you lose all power. You, your community, no longer have autonomy, and the police and the state apparatus deals with the whole thing, right? So it's actually taking away your power, right? So part of revisioning a world without prisons is saying, listen, let's come up with new models, autonomous models, where we respond to our harms as communities. There's different models like restorative justice that look at crime in completely different ways, where the whole idea of a system that repairs our harms and makes us feel safe, it's not punitive. The response is not simply incarceration. The response is repairing the harm, repairing the community harm, repairing the harm that was done to the other person, and repairing the person. Because usually what we'll find is folks that commit quote-unquote crimes, and if you look at these crimes, usually these are actions that people are doing, poor people are doing, for economic reasons. That's usually what it comes down to. So, and I'm going in a lot of different directions, but so in a real way, most crimes are the criminalization of the actions, the desperate actions of poor people to support themselves outside of the mainstream economy. That's what most crimes are, right? That's really what crime is. So when folks say, hey, you know, like this political prisoner is behind bars, and you know, how dare they put this political prisoner behind bars, with all of these really, really horrible actual prisoners who are, you know, drug dealers and they've committed real offenses. We need to really critique why we use that language, right? And really think what a political prisoner is. Because from my perspective, most of the folks, if not all the folks behind bars, are political prisoners. Because their actions are either in response to the policies, the wayward policies of this very, very corrupt, capitalist, consumerist, racist, patriarchal system, right? Or if it's not a direct response, it's an indirect response to that. So to me, everybody, or the vast majority of folks behind bars, are political prisoners. And until we create movements where, if we're not directly working on prison abolition and the abolition of capitalism, right, and the abolition of a lot of these other oppressions, in all of our actions we're conscious of that, right? And since we know that the actions of animal liberation activists are criminalized, similarly, I still said it wrong, to the actions of poor folks, Black and Latino folks, who are forced to make decisions that they are forced to do out of economic reality. Immigrants, undocumented immigrants, who are the largest group of prisoners now, especially considering the new Patriot Act laws after 9/11, North African, South Asian, Middle Eastern folks, more than ever, right? We need to connect ourselves into these broader movements, because that's what's happening. The same state apparatus that's locking up our friends and criminalizing our actions also criminalizing the actions of a lot of other folks. And the same sort of methods that are used against our friends are used against a whole lot of folks, right? So even when we're doing this work and we're in our other spaces, we need to be conscious of this, right? And since we're engaged in these criminal activities, we also need to be engaged in a prison abolitionist politics. So I'm just going to stop there, and I guess we could have some dialogue. My foot is dead. Wow, that's kind of weird.
So we raised a lot of sort of provocative issues. Does anyone have any questions or comments or anything? It's okay if they're not maybe directly related to something.
I just have a question for Mo.
Yeah.
You were talking about critical resistance, communities acting autonomously, kind of like forging their own futures and things like that. You also mentioned that most crimes were economically motivated. How does a community deal with crimes that have nothing to do with politics or economics, such as child abuse or sexual assault? How would a community deal with that?
Well, I'm glad you bring it up. And usually with abolition talks, most people bring it up. Prison abolitionists are not crazy, right? They understand that prisons, the criminal justice system, the police, it's society's response to our fears and to our feeling of needing to be safe, right? And also, there are some very, very bad people who do very, very bad things to people. There are also some not very bad people who also do very bad things to people in their communities. But bad stuff happens in between people, right? That's real, you know? So how do we respond to that? You know, I think prison abolition is more about the response rather than the cage. It's more about the process that we go by as a community to resolve our harms. So in the case of a child molester or a murderer or anything else, and also, like, just to be clear, all of those things that we talk about, our most egregious crimes, are such a small percentage of crime. You know, like serial killers. Like, it's such a random occurrence. However, it's popularized because it's pretty freaky, right? And also our media chooses to popularize certain crimes, like interracial crimes. When a black person kills a white person, that's on the front page. If it's like two black people killing each other, maybe like buried inside or something like that. Also, the way that race plays into it, just say if a white guy kills somebody, they'll probably use his high school yearbook picture. If there's a black guy, they'll use his mugshot, you know, and it'll be bigger, right? So FAIR, this organization that studies media, studied this. So it's also the way we understand things. So let's just be really clear about what's really happening. These really, really egregious offenses hardly ever happen. They do happen, and when they do happen, if there was an autonomous apparatus that dealt with it, the result would be different. Maybe, and maybe the community might say, this person is so crazy and such a threat to us, we need to banish this person, confine this person. Maybe that might happen. I'm fine with that as long as the response is autonomous and at all times the community, opposed to the state, has control over that. And the community is figuring it out for themselves. I think more times than not, the community will discover all these sort of, will contextualize it and figure out this person's story and say, oh, this is why. Wow, you're mentally ill. Oh, you're mentally retarded and mentally ill. Oh, here are these other factors. You know, wow, perhaps if we gave you housing, and this is not saying like we're gonna like hook you up because you murdered someone, right? But this is saying on top of you repairing the damage, like that's one side. So what are we going to do for you to repair the damage? It might be a number of things. It might even be incarceration, who knows, right? But on top of all that, we're also going to repair you unless we as a society are also agreeing that we're going to indefinitely lock you up, because that's the only way we could be safe from somebody, right? Is if we indefinitely lock everybody up. And most people who go to jail and prison come back. They don't stay behind bars, right? Most people don't have indefinite life sentences. Most people get out at some point, right? So unless we're saying every person we don't like, we're locking up for life, jail and prison, again, isn't a good response. Because once they come out, they're out. And if they're messed up, they'll still be messed up and probably more messed up, right? So let's, instead of saying that, it's like, okay, you did something messed up, chances are there's a reason for it. Let's check that reason. Let's resolve